What you keep smiling for?
Suits you, being in charge.
Yeah. Doing John, does it?
Maybe a bit.
Love Hate Season 5 is a solid conclusion to the show that I do not care to watch. Season 5 is an interesting one for me because this was the only one I watched week to week. The lead up to this thing was great. Online rumours saying it was going to be 12 episodes, the newspaper showed images of what was supposedly Elmo's funeral, and the papers just ran with the idea that this was a leak. You can even see this article here in the Mirror that says Elmo is due to be killed off in the next season. So on one level there was misdirection about the actual events of the season, but there was misdirection about the nature of the season 2. This is the last one, but it's not marketed as it. And throughout the season's airings, Stuart Carroll and RTE were saying there would likely be a 6th season, which is good in a sense for preserving the surprise of the ending. Where other shows in their final seasons tie up loose ends and move towards the finale with a sense things are building towards the climax, this still leaves stories unresolved and doesn't immediately scream that it's all wrapping up, which in some instances is effective, but it also leaves spaces for filler too. Despite being the most recent, this is the season that almost feels the most dated to me because of this scene in O'Devany Gardens. Literally none of this exists anymore. And this is the season that annoys me the most, with this scene where Nidge is dropped off here and then exits a gate here. And this is also the season I've seen the least, so on some level it's more engaging than the rest of it for me because I don't know it as well, and compared to the 4th season, this is much better paced and this has a much tighter story. I think the best illustrator of the quick and pace this season is Fran. Not one episode of the season goes by without him either experiencing a close brush with death, the law, or him learning something earth-shattering. Once more, the new characters bring new ideas with them, and out of all 5 of the seasons, this is the best the show has ever looked. According to the Irish Independent, at this stage, the budget for an episode of the show is €600,000. The season is nice to look at, but miserable to watch. The second half in particular, the lighting is darker, the stories are darker, the characters are all on the edge, stressed out, worn down, drugged up, crying out, self-harming, and the violence gets unbelievably coarse, necessitated in part by the story moving into a prison. In the second half of the season, there are few laughs and the jukebox soundtrack is skewed for a much more sinister backing track. But this is personal preference, none of this is a criticism. If I had to rank the seasons, I'd go 3, 2, 5, 4, 1. It is very well written, and I think in many ways it's the most logical conclusion to the show. But the later stages of these 6 episodes are just littered with these moments where you know they're coming, and you absolutely dread to see them, whether it's wincing at the violence on screen, or just how draining some of the stress and the emotions are. When it was at its best, this was a show you didn't want to end. The 5th series brings home the message that it needed to. But I'd like to start talking about it with a question I don't feel is very often asked at this show. What's the best episode of Love Hate? It's not a question the show invites you to ask. There's no guest writers, there's rarely a guest director. It's heavily serialized and the episodes don't even have titles. But if there is a candidate for the best episode of the show, I think it might be the first episode of the 5th season. And unsurprisingly, it's mainly because of the writing. This is not a knock by any means, but this series is fairly atypically written. The stories are told linearly, there's no dream sequences or abstractions, there's no great perspective switches, there's only one flashback, and there's only 2 instances of flashes forward in time, the beginning of the 3rd season and throughout this episode. And where season 3 episode 1 began with Nidge in control and ended with him up to his knees, this episode begins with him at his lowest ebb and ends with him on stronger footing. A welcome departure, given that since taking over from John Boy, Nidge has lurched from one disaster to another. After a beautiful intro showing Patrick returning to Ireland, this season begins with Nidge with a scar on his head, flying to Spain. Throughout this episode, it cuts back between Nidge and Ireland in the weeks preceding his visit to Costa del Sol, but each pull back to Ireland is teed up by a line of dialogue related to one of the season's stories. His relationship with Fran, the people out to kill him, the Garda informant, his new employee, and the first bit of good luck he's had in a while. These are the stories that take up this season, and after the much slower pace of the previous season and a year's wait, this really felt like a much needed gear shift. And bravely enough, the programme shows you Nidge's near brush with death, despite the fact that you've already seen Nidge's escape with a cut in his head. So you already know he's going to make it out. This scene is quite tense, and this is a show which is ruthless with killing off main characters. Had we seen this not knowing he makes it out, there could well have been some suspense, and these flashbacks are lined up for us courtesy of the man Nidge has come to see, Terence. Terence is a crucial character for this whole series, despite not being in it very much. Throughout the show, there is an end goal in mind for John Boy and Nidge.
You don't get out, you end up dead.
Bringing enough this way and you could retire.
Barbados, whatever you want.
The quote, "You don't get up, you end up dead," was the title of this love-hate retrospective made by Michal O'Hatlig, which I'll link in the description, and that idea of getting out before it's too late is what Terence has accomplished, and it's all in his name.
Gone off to see Terence Big Balls.
Now, characters have had nicknames before, but the distinction I'd make is each previous nickname is the sort a friend gives another friend. Usually just your name, but shortened with the letter O attached.
Dano!
Terence, on the other hand, has a nickname that reeks of the sort one gets from a newspaper. He has been doing this long enough to be so far removed removed from any business he does in Ireland, he gets to play the front of a legitimate nightclub owner in Spain. This is probably the most menacing out of all the love-hate characters. He has this piercing glare, he never raises his voice, he does the opposite. The angrier he is, the lower his voice gets.
I want to see her at the funeral.
And when he orders the torture and murder of Janet, he is unwavering and possibly even enjoys it. Now, I've never gone in for the argument that this show glamorizes this life, but if somebody made that argument about Terence, you might have to hear them out because you don't see how his story ends. The last you see of him, he's sitting in a lovely villa in Spain. But this is a good example of wanting what someone has and not how they got it. You don't get to be where he is without having done some monstrous things, and with Janet, he really demonstrates to Nidge what it takes to get to the top. Nidge hoped he would get to Terence's level without needing his help, and to go cap in hand is bruising to his ego. This season, Nidge and his gang start receiving protection money from a pub called the Pavin. The owner has been getting hassle from locals, so Nidge agrees to be seen there on the regular, and I think this is the stuff he enjoys, to be seen as intimidating and to be paid for it. But when he's face to face with Terence, he just has to take his dressing down. Terence may be back in Spain, but there's someone there in Dublin to twist the knife.
I'm not one of your bum boys, Nidge.
Paulie is the perfect mascot for this season because I think he's well written, but I don't necessarily enjoy watching him. After a season sans Darren and Tommy, he's the first competent gangster we've seen in a while. He has his wits about him, he's suave, and maybe a little too suave for Nidge. This is the first time Nidge has had someone he can't boss around, and it eats him up because he's not in total charge. Paulie outright tells Nidge he doesn't care if he lives or dies, as long as his uncle is paid back. It's only natural that he would take Paulie getting with Siobhan to be a personal attack on him. So blinded by rage is he that he can't see the irony of this statement.
He's a fucking slob.
Well, he's flaunted in front of the same people the fact that he cheats on Trish for years, but far be it from me to be in agreement with Nidge, but I hate seeing Siobhan with Paulie too. Siobhan, by this stage, just to recap, has experienced so much suffering for so long, that's probably what prompted to say this.
I'm sick of being a good girl, Trish, you know that?
Exactly the sort of cliched thing a woman her age would come out with. So, for the first time in years, Siobhan actually finds a way to enjoy herself. But it's through behaviour and company which are so clearly wrong, and with a guy who's so obviously awful. I love how the fact that Paulie already having kids and a wife is treated as no big revelation.
I didn't know he was married already.
He's not. He's separated.
Because of course he does. Siobhan being with this guy and taking his drugs would be bad enough, only now it's when she's informing for the police shows she is so much more susceptible to let something slip, which of course she does. But it's really hard to be mad at her for any of it, because she's had to endure so much and she makes a lot of mistakes. But by the show's 5th season, she's maybe 22, 23, and makes a lot of errors befitting a person her age. It's just a cruel twist of fate she makes them in this world. And while I may be speaking about her as if she's a real person, she certainly feels it. What I like about Siobhan is she isn't one of those characters who's written just to suffer. I'm looking at you, Anna and Bates. Because Siobhan is incredibly brave, but at times can be incredibly stupid, and any indulgences she makes throughout the season are incomparable to what she brings upon herself in the last episode. This is her best season, and it's the best season for the only other female character who gets top billing, Trish. There's not been a whole lot to say about Trish till now, but she's not underwritten. She's exactly who this man would be with. The only time these two are happy together is when they're intimate or when they're giving each other presents. These are shallow people. The rest of the time they're angry or bored. But if there was more to her, she'd be with someone else. Trish just wants the nice things and will turn the other cheek. However, by the 5th season, this is easier said than done, and she does start to notice this is not a temporary blip in her marriage. This man is always like this. For the longest time now, Nidge has been highly strung around her, and his justification has always been he's under a lot of pressure.
Under a lot of pressure, Trish.
And where have we heard that before?
Somewhat pressure, that's all.
But in a sense, the Tidge relationship has grown.
There's 2 hits on me.
Now, he's not giving her details of who these people are, but everybody remembers the very first scene of the first episode.
Update me Bebo page.
Updating me Bebo page.
What people forget is the point of that scene is he's hiding that he's watching a tutorial on changing clips in a gun. Now their relationship has grown to the point where he lets her in on a bit more. Another relationship that grows stronger this season is Elmo. However, in spite of all Nidge's posturing about the respect he has for Elmo's dad, Elmo was really only brought closer by being the last man standing after Nidge's relationship with Fran falls to pieces.
Fuck you.
How many movies have you seen where somebody says you should have killed me when you had the chance? Well, Nidge really should have. At the season's beginning, he has Fran cornered. He knows Fran hung him out to dry, knowing Andrew was talking to the police, and he lets him live, saying he needs him. And in a sense, he does. John Boy's threat to Darren was,
I could pay 100 17-year-old crackerjacks to come and to hunt you day and night. 10 grand each, 100 grand for the winner. You wouldn't last 24 hours. See, that's the kind of money I have.
Nidge does not have that kind of money. and genuinely needs the help. Where John Boy and Terrence give their orders from their apartments, Nidge is always in the thick of it. Paulie said he likes to do hits himself to keep his wits about him. Nidge, I think, would like to be sitting back, giving the orders and collecting the money, but it's just not feasible for him. Even after becoming boss, Nidge doesn't leave his home in Castle Knock. And while this is a better house than you or I could hope for, it's not a penthouse or a Spanish villa or that ski lodge thing the Kinsellas live in. I think Nidge would like to move somewhere like that, not alone because of how susceptible this house is to home invasions, and when he does move houses this season after things escalate with Patrick, it really is a lateral move house-wise. In any event, he does let Fran live, but later in the season he does the same for Dean. I think he really is hard up for a bit of company. Like this season, Moynihan has an undercover guy, Scotty, hanging out around the cabin. He gets in close enough to be offered a job as a driver, but wrecks it all by sleeping with Nadine and getting caught by Nidge. And Nidge, despite supposedly being Ado's friend, and despite Ado just having had his brother's eye cut out, is delighted to find out Ado is being cheated on. But it's not entirely because this opens up the possibility of his getting with Nadine, or just because he's a prick.
Stop as I'm upset, yeah?
This is something he has in his back pocket to hold over Scotty if he ever needed something done. But also in relation to Fran, I think Nidge enjoys how the power dynamic in their relationship shifts back to almost where it was in the third season, where Fran was licking his boots, where Fran would do anything to please him. This is short-lived, however, as this would include Fran doing things he explicitly told him not to do, like go and talk to Patrick.
Take it back with you, and use it to buy yourself a headstone.
I think this scene is the cherry on the cake of the first episode, after they've each made attempts on each other. Nidge and Patrick are persuaded into a sit-down, and just at the moment it seems Patrick is going to go for it.
He has the nits, does he?
There's what?
The nits. You know, the headlights. Best way to get rid of them, shave the head. Into the bar by getting number one.
Oh, you asked me does my young fella have headlights?
What?
Nidge's fate is sealed with a faux pas, but I think part of why this is so potent to Patrick is even the most respectable person from his background has had to take that kind of remark from someone like that. Patrick's background is explored more this season. There's a lot of slang I don't understand and some thick accents. And Patrick takes his son out for a meal after he's been getting hassle in school for living on a site. Once again, like with Dano or with Moynihan, Nidge is coming up against somebody who believes in something greater. I said previously that Patrick tried his best to stay out of trouble not for fear of his life but for fear of what it takes to win. This includes turning his home into a fortress of sorts, but also using himself as bait to take out his assassin. He lets Paulie follow him to the pub and gets him to chase him out the back, banking on him being shot in the back. He perhaps approaches this with such zeal because in between seasons he's had an infant die on him, which just makes the event of the fourth episode hit harder.
Cold.
This is an interesting season to watch in two halves. The first 3 episodes is love-hate as you have known it till now, but once Potsy attempts a hit on Fran, things take a turn for the dark. This 4th episode is one of the most depressing episodes of television I've ever seen. In the aftermath of the failed hit on Fran, we contrast Paulie in a dingy hospital bed with only a prison guard as company, with Tommy who still has someone coming in to see him. Ado, distraught at the news his brother had his eye cut out, goes back to his flat, and Nidge visits him, not to comfort him, but because Ado mentioned he may have a way of getting to Patrick. And this is where we meet Packy. Packy is somebody who racked up huge debts with Ado while addicted to drugs. He's gotten clean, and we meet him as being part of a group where former drug addicts dance to metal music and scream Bible verses at each other, which is just so crazy it must be true. And to add credibility, this group features Irish rapper Tommy KD, who has spoken on rap for years about his struggles with drug addiction. And a version of this group here is something he was a part of at one stage of his recovery. Packy is plucked from this group by Ado to perform the hit on Patrick. The reason being they're both travellers. He doesn't want to do the hit, but he owes Ado money. We see a different side to Ado here. While he's always been the comic relief till now, this brings home that if you came across this guy in real life, you'd cross the street. But what we've seen preceding this is Ado making it known to everyone except Nidge that he didn't want Potsy doing the hit. And he probably wants nothing to do with this either, but he's incapable of standing up for himself in relation to this, due presumably to his history of addiction. Earlier in series 2, John Boy shunned Ado for his habit after the hotel bust, and he just sat there in silence taking the abuse. But when you have someone like that, and then you have the rung beneath them, it's even more tragic. Packy clearly isn't cut out to perform this hit, so you're watching it just dreading it, knowing something will go wrong. And it does. Not alone does he hit Patrick's son Brandon, but he's captured and is left behind. There is no notion of anyone coming to save him. This is not the love-hate of yesteryear where Darren's facing off against a group of gunmen to save Nidge. Packy's fate is as gruesome as the others this season. We're shielded only from seeing just how gruesome due to a light bulb being out. Before killing him, there's a long conversation between Patrick and Packy about whether or not he'll do it. In his retrospective of the series for The Independent, Pat Stacey wrote of this scene, tedious philosophical musings about the consequences of taking a life suggested too many viewings of Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven. I would push back on that just a bit. From the one or two interviews with John Connors I've listened to, he has spoken about what it meant to him to be seen as a man, or less of a man in his community, and he spoke about it in relation to losing his father at a young age. And in this scene, Patrick speaks to Packy about how were he to let him live, he would be deemed weak and unable to protect his family. So one could assume John Connors bore influence on Stuart Carolan in relation to this. So while someone else looked at this scene and saw stuff they'd seen before, I think this conversation taking place between two Irish travellers is a fresh spin on it. But like all the standout moments from this season, it's really well done. And you just want it to be over so you can take a shower or watch something frothier. And our reward for having suffered through all of that is to see Siobhan kill off Paulie, as if she hadn't enough on her plate already, meaning she now can't be honest with Moynihan. Moynihan and the Gardaí I actually find less interesting this season. They just aren't given as much to do, less time is spent with them, but where last season they were constantly getting new intel, putting a case together, this is less so what happens here. Whereas last season it built towards Siobhan informing on Nidge, all that they get from Siobhan this season is that Paulie is meeting with someone at the zoo. They arrest Fran, twice, and Elmo, but neither of that is to do with the information Siobhan gives them. In Elmo's case, he's followed, he goes to buy a SIM card, and they go in afterwards to get the number and intercept his calls and texts. However, I do think it's interesting that the fallout from Elmo's arrest is Janet's murder. However, while Nidge, Beano and Terence get all worked up over a rat, Elmo's arrest had nothing to do with the info Siobhan was giving Moynihan. So that's stuff I like. But there's some non-starters this season. This season tries to show a little bureaucracy in the guards. There's a superintendent that guys hate, who's mandating stops and searches, and who seems to be more interested in keeping up appearances than good police work. He's declining extra resources to go towards the case after the bust up at Andrew's warehouse, and is nonplussed about Terence financially backing Nidge. I'd be interested to see these explored more, but they aren't. Same as well with the scenes of Moynihan at home. There's one or two scenes of him at home with his wife, and I think the idea is he's married to his job and they're distant from one another. But again, these scenes are really neither here nor there. When I first watched this season, not knowing it was about to end, I didn't mind these scenes because I thought it was going somewhere. But on the rewatch, these are just killing runtime, and it's a pity because I like this character and I wish he had more to do, but he really doesn't get it until the last episode. So this last episode of Love Hate is an interesting one for me to talk about, because while I was watching this week to week, I didn't have a TV. So I tried watching it on RT Player live, but in something which has been satirized since, within seconds of the show beginning, the website crashed. There was just too many people trying to watch this thing, so I'd always watch the episodes on the Monday morning. However, at this time I was addicted to Facebook, so I couldn't stay away for one evening, and sure enough, the night of episode 6, everybody was writing about Nidge's death. So I was watching this last episode knowing what was coming at the end. And in a sense it did spoil it for me, because this last episode is trying to misdirect you. It is building towards the police closing in on Nidge. After the end of the 4th episode, Patrick disappears. He's not seen or heard from till the last 2 minutes of the episode. Where previously the show showed how he tracked and followed Nidge, this one does not show you he knows where Nidge lives, or when his security are away. So despite having been robbed of that surprise, I still really like this episode. The idea being that Janet's torture and death is where it all gets too much. Nidge is unable to live with himself. Moynihan breaks down and just punches Nidge. This last episode gives us Trish's best scene. After Nidge tells you what happened to Janet.
Maybe it's a woman thing.
What?
You're able to wait till you fucked me first.
Jesus Christ, Trish, it's not like that. I wanted to tell you, didn't I tell you now?
But there are standout moments of agony. There's the one from the memes with Fran and the pool cue. It's horrendous. This is one of those bits you watch from behind the couch. But almost more agonizing is Siobhan. After enduring so much, she indulges and permits herself to give Nidge a piece of her mind, and to let him know she's getting back at him by talking to the police. This puts her at Nidge's side and she catches a stray bullet from Patrick's gun. When you think about it, Siobhan's death is potentially the most tragic out of all the characters. However, you wouldn't think about it because the show devotes a mere second to dwell on it, because the scene is all about the death of the main man, and the scene is expertly acted by Tom Von Lawler.
You little fucking bitch.
Care to believe me?
I've not really spoken about Lawler till now because I wanted to save it to the end, but also what is there to say that hasn't already been said? The reason those side-by-side videos of his accent are so funny is precisely because it is so convincing. But the best is saved for last. This final scene between him and Siobhan has to be his best performance in the show. The way his pupils dilate, the way his throat gets caught, and he calls her an ungrateful wagon.
You're an ungrateful wagon, you know that? A fucking tramp!
In an interview, Lawler said he thought Nidge was incredibly shrewd and smart, which at first glance seems hilarious because apart from naming his baby John to throw the police off the scent, almost every decision Nidge makes after becoming the boss is the wrong decision. But I think to get into character, he really had to understand his intentions and motivation, and hats off to him for inhabiting that character so well, right up until the moment he's shot down, looking at his son, bringing the show we all love so much to an end. So what I've enjoyed about this rewatch is seeing what you make of it once it's done. As opposed to other shows where before the first episode is written and end point is in mind, this was a show which was made up as it went along, but it took it a step further by ending almost each season on the off chance they could end there. So when you watch the first episode to the last, is it a collection of good separate stories, or does it tell a good story from beginning to end? And I think it does. I think the story starts with a boss who so clearly makes all the wrong calls, the person closest to him takes him out, takes his place, and slowly but surely makes the same mistakes. And that is why I think Nidge's death is the perfect place to end the show. In my opinion, I think the reports about a Series 6 was just done to keep the ending a surprise, and I don't think it was seriously considered. While Moynihan and Patrick are good characters that are still going, and there's no connection between them, and any subsequent stories would be so different there'd be no point in calling it love-hate, and they'd be better off as spin-offs, like with War and Peace. In 2015, RTE said Love-Hate was no longer in active development, and in 2017, John Connors confirmed Love-Hate would not be returning. Dennis Lehane, who had written for The Wire, was attached in 2015 to make an American remake of Love-Hate, and to state the blindingly obvious, this is a terrible idea. Every good review Love-Hate has ever gotten always says Irish Sopranos, Irish Wire, and this show wears its influences on its sleeve. So when you take our equivalent of the American telly and then remake it in America, it's sort of like the snake eating its own tail. Anyway, I never really believed this show would get made. It didn't, and then that was where the notion of any more love-hate content died. Until...
Is Love-Hate coming back? The floor is yours.
Yeah.
It is?
It is?
Yeah, it is coming back, yeah.
In February 2025, John Connors went to the 6 o'clock show and announced, apropos of nothing, that Love-Hate was coming back and was due to be announced soon. He then took it a step further in a series of TikToks, announcing that much like the Top Boy revival, it was coming back on Netflix, back-to-back seasons were being shot, so not only a 6th season but a 7th, and he took it even a step further by saying Nidge was alive. This spawned many articles, some running with the news it was coming back, others questioning it. Things got even more confused when an article in The Independent appeared saying Stuart Carolan was working on a new crime drama which would be the spiritual successor to Love-Hate, but not an out-and-out new season. It was very confusing. Within days, representatives of RTE and Netflix confirmed the show was not returning. It readily became apparent Connors was making it up, and if one looked at the TikToks he made announcing the show's return, they always went hand in hand with him announcing something else he was working on, like his live events, his production company, or his podcast. Connors was criticised by many, but not by me, because it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge how these videos benefited from Love-Hate being back in the news. But would I want to see this show return? Definitely not. All that I'd be interested in is Love-Hate babies. Warren saw his own father gunned down, Brandon took a stray bullet, and Leighton is a whole other kettle of fish. Given that it's been 10 years and they would all be late teens, I'd be interested to see what became of them. But all that'd be good for is a short film, and not a series. That being said, however, I don't wish for us to be done. I think what Love-Hate really needs is a making of documentary. I speculated in these videos an awful lot more than I would have wished to. Researching these videos, the information about how the show was made was so disparate, and a lot of the actors either have too small a profile to be interviewed, or so large is their profile that when they are being interviewed, it's for something else they've done. But the acting is only one part of it, and the people I'd really want to hear from are Carolan, the director David Caffrey, and the brass at RTE who greenlit the show. I'd also love to hear commentary tracks on the episodes, and a Blu-ray box set would be the perfect place to put all of that. The only physical copies one can get of the show are on DVD, so unless I'm mistaken, the only HD versions are the one from RTE Player with the watermark in the top right. So here's hoping for something like that eventually. I suppose to wrap things up I ought to talk about the show's legacy, but I sort of did that at the start of the first video. And yeah, there's been imitators since, and when Kin came out, Love-Hate was in the first paragraph of everything written about it. Perhaps the show's legacy need be no greater than, it's a really well made show that you can revisit again and again. Although speaking personally, throughout the process of making these videos and grabbing all this footage, I've had my fill and probably won't be going back for another 10 years or so. Unless of course I get myself a partner and I show it to her. So yeah, not for another 10 years. I am on Gap Year Forever, and this has been my Love-Hate rewatch.